radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. Oh, wow. Good evening. Fade to Black. Today is Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. River Moon Coffee. Yeah, I did it. I did it right there. All right. Great show tonight. Mike Ricksecker is with us. A great week here on the show. A short week. Monday night, we had Robert Sullivan with us discussing occult symbolism. Last night, we had a great AMA AJA where you get to ask me anything. Tonight, Mike Ricksecker is back with us. Tonight, portals, Stargates, Atlantis, all the fun stuff. And then tomorrow night, we are off air. Yeah, I've got to do some of that TV stuff. I've got one event coming up. It is the Psy Games, August 1st through the 3rd of 2025 in Charlottesville, Virginia. The Psychic Olympics, everyone. I am the host of the Psychic Olympics. It couldn't be better for me personally. And the links for everything are below. That's right. Speakers, event, the venue, the schedule, tickets, everything that you need are in the links below for the Psy Games. So with that, I had something I was going to say, but you know what? At this point, it doesn't matter because we have Mike Ricksecker here. Oh, now I know what I was going to say because I just said his name. Mike has been with us for a very long time. And I always enjoy when he's on the show, and we do a lot of things together throughout the year. There's that part, but here's the other part. And every time that Mike is on the show, every time I go to Mike's social media stuff, dude is always doing something. He's at an event, he's on a plane, he's flying here, he's over in the Middle East, he's in Egypt, he's back, he's this, he's that. Signing autographs, book, his booth, his thing, TV, all that stuff, and his own network and everything. He's always busy. How busy is he? Oh, you like that? How busy is he? So we're doing sound check, and he goes, "Man, I just wrapped my live stream 15 minutes ago, and I'm back in here, and now I've got you." And if I said, "Mike, man, take a deep breath, man." And this is what he does. And I appreciate Mike so much. And so with that, I kind of want to just get straight into it, but we're going to be discussing his book tonight, Portals to the Stars, Inside Stargates, Atlantis, and Secrets of Ancient Egypt. We're going to be doing that. He's got his other books out, of course, Travels Through Time, which is a great book. I have it. A Walk in the Shadows. I have that too. And Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. I have that as well. He's a researcher. He's been on Ancient Aliens. He's been on the Unexplained, of course, the Alaska Triangle, Fright Club, and of course, Gaia TV. He also directs the docu-series The Shadow Dimension and produces videos on ancient mysteries and the supernatural. Of course, he's got Edge of the Rabbit Hole. He's got that live stream, and we've got the links up for Connecting the Universe. Those links are below. You've got to go and take his class. With all of that, I want to bring in my favorite secret agent, Mike Ricksecker. There he is right there. Mike, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty well. Jimmy, how you doing tonight?
You know, I get to say that, though. I get to actually say that. My favorite secret agent. You know, let me ask you this. If I ever get in trouble, can I call you?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know what good I'll be able to do for you, but sure. Go ahead and call me.
I get one phone call. Mike Ricksecker, secret agent. That's who I'm calling. That's who I'm calling. I want to kind of start here, and we've done so many things over the years and so many interviews, but can we address your childhood? Have we ever discussed your childhood?
I don't know if we have. I mean, I had one.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do want to, since we're talking about childhood, I do want to recognize today is my sister's 50th birthday. Happy birthday to my sister.
Oh, what's her name?
Her name is Tony.
Tony, is she a secret agent too as well? Does it run in the family?
She is not. No,
she is not.
She's a trainer and does a very good job at it. So yeah.
Happy birthday, Tony. The big 50. Man, if I could be 50 again, that sounds so young to me. Yeah, gosh, man. Okay, so anyway, let's discuss your childhood. I know we all know your career path and your education path, what resulted later. But as a kid, did you see ghosts? Did you UFOs? Did you have an interest in any of this growing up?
Yeah, I did. And that's, really how I first got into all this is I was an experiencer at a very young age, about 8 years old. My book, A Walk in the Shadows, initially dives into that experience and then gets into all the shadow person research. Because my first significant experience as a child was about 8 years old and woke up in the middle of the night, kind of that classic story of, there's a tall, dark figure standing in the corner of my bedroom. And, had no idea about the concept of shadow people or anything like that at the time. I thought there was an intruder in the house. I figured somebody had broken in, was there to rob the place, maybe kill me, because that's where your mind goes as an 8-year-old. So I was frightened. I thought somebody had broken in. And so I was trying to scream, but I'm so frightened at that age that nothing's coming out of my mouth. Did something really unusual at that point. Walked up to my bed and leaned over. I'm just staring into this blank black face, just nothing there, no eyes, no mouth, nothing. And did something really unusual. Grabbed my wrists, crossed them across my body, and then it ran off down the hall. And, the whole time I was trying to scream, but I was just too frightened. By the time it ran off, I finally found my voice, found my legs, ran off screaming in my parents' bedroom. Trying to tell them what happened. They're trying to console me, calm me down, trying to tell me I'd just had a bad dream. But, I knew I hadn't had a bad dream. I was awake for this whole incident. And that was my first real significant paranormal incident. I would never call it a haunted house. It was like a one-off incident that happened there. I had a hypnosis.
Let me, if you're going to have a first experience, holy crap, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty frightening for that age. But here's what's interesting about that, considering what you write about and what you research today. Would you classify that experience, looking back as an adult, right? Would you classify what you encountered interdimensional, a spirit, a ghost? What classification does that fall into?
Yeah, that was a big part of my research for a long time, trying to figure out exactly what this was. And what I ended up determining over several years of research and talking with other people that had similar experiences is, these things can be all different kinds of things. Some can be spirits, some can be interdimensional in nature, some can be extraterrestrial, some can be astral projections, time slips, all these different things. My specific incident, so I think it was 4 or 5 years ago now, I had a hypnotic regression to try to finally figure out what once and for all this thing was. And what was fascinating about that hypnosis session was we were actually able to channel the being that had interacted with me when I was 8 years old. And it was fascinating because when that happened, I was able to, in this hypnosis session, actually able to see the entire incident, but from the other point of view, from the shadow's point of view, instead of my own. So it was really kind of disconcerting at first because I'm looking down on my little 8-year-old self, but I could feel everything that this thing was also feeling. And so, it wasn't there to scare me. It was there to observe. So the hypnotherapist was asking me, or asking it a bunch of different questions through me, as who are you, why are you here, where you're from, those sorts of things. So without getting too lengthy into the whole thing, basically what we were able to figure out was that this thing was there from another dimension. It called it another space rather than dimension, which was kind of interesting, but essentially there from another dimension to study humanity. It was assigned to the room of a human child that evening. Didn't realize that I could actually, or that it could actually be seen by me. And when it realized that, and realized that it was actually scaring me, the whole crossing the arms, it was trying to put me into a self hug. And from that point of view, I could also see that it patted my wrist, and then it got out of there so it would stop scaring me.
The idea behind that, and going into a session and regressing into it, that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of nad. What if you found out something completely the opposite of that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I could have found out anything. And what was interesting was, before that, I had a number of people, like separate people, years between, these different people that were suggesting to me, like, well, perhaps because it did that whole crossing the arms, perhaps it thought you were dead and was putting you to a burial pose, like crook and flail, like something like ancient Egypt, which I thought was an interesting idea. So that was one of the things that I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll get that out of it, rather than, yeah, sure. A lot of people, when they think of shadow people and all that, they go down like the evil, dark, nasty route, which most of them aren't. But that could have come out of it. But I was interested, is it going to be, Egyptian time traveler or something like that? And it turned out to be this whole other thing. So yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah, if I have a Pandora's box, Mike, is going into directly going upstairs into my bedroom, and I have an option at that point. When I go into the dark room, I can either flick the light switch, which is right next to me, and then turn on the overhead lights, right? Yeah. Or I can go into the dark room a couple of steps to my nightstand and then tap my lamp on the nightstand. It's a touch lamp, and illuminate the room. Either way, my fear is in doing that I turn on and something is standing there. That's man, you know what I mean? It's like that, and it's called physics, probabilities. It's going to happen at some point.
At some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because these things are all around us. We don't, our eyes only see into a very narrow band of the spectrum, but these things are all around us. And sometimes they pass into our dimension. We're able to get a glimpse in. And yeah, I just use Alexa before I walk into the room these days.
Yeah, I know. Right. I'm serious. It's like, okay, tonight's the night. Here we go.
There you go.
And but nothing is there. But I haven't had that encounter. Mm-hmm. But if we get into the concept of the word interdimensional is overused today, isn't it? I mean, it's just like everything, but it answers and checks a lot of boxes, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah, it's kind of become a catch-all for a lot of things these days. It was, I don't know, a seemingly newer concept as of maybe only 5-6 years ago, and now everything is interdimensional. But it does account for a lot of these different things that we are seeing and witnessing. We have up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions, so this is something that could be out of the 5th, 6th, 7th. We're not exactly sure, but it does account for a lot of these different things that we're witnessing.
Now, that's today, where our level, our ability to understand, to know, knowledge, right? It increases every day. We become a little smarter. So interdimensional is a concept that we can, in a general sense, accept and understand because of science and physics and what we know. And certainly the Marvel universe doesn't hurt with all of that too as well. But going back into history, the level of knowledge wasn't there, but the interdimensional portal idea has been around forever, since the dawn of time. So when we push it back into history, an interdimensional being could have been considered anything, couldn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of like a rediscovering these days of these different ideas and concepts. And these were things that the ancients were already discussing and they were already talking about. And, a lot of their beings that were coming through that considered gods, or like the ancient Egyptians, they considered them netters or forces of nature and these sorts of things. But they had all kinds of interactions with these different beings. They were using Stargates. Of course, we see that emblazoned all over the place out there in Egypt, but even other cultures, of course, had these different concepts as well.
The ideas. Okay, I just got back from Peru.
Right. Yeah.
And I've been to Egypt as you have many times too as well. So when we look at this, you go around Peru where you're visiting site. Well, you can do this with any culture around the world for sure. But anyway, where you see in the megalithic structures and these different sites, an obvious to us today, portals, chairs, things that they go to nowhere, ceremonial, spiritual. Yeah. But I look at it today, I'm like, man, that's a portal.
Yeah.
They were accessing this. Now, today we look at the science side of it, but it seems that, and if we go back to Atlantis or something like that, it was something that they knew about and they accepted, and it was also easy for them to do, wasn't it?
It was. And what's fascinating to me is that back in ancient times, there was no division between science and technology, or spirituality and science and technology as well, because your priests were, they're your religious leaders, they're your spiritual leaders, but they were also your engineers. They were also the ones that were developing technology. It was all one cohesive unit. And it was over the last couple of millennia that we decided to split science and spirituality from each other, which really did us a great disservice. But I think these days we are starting to bring that back together, and we're starting to rediscover that one proves the other, and these two concepts really are integrated within each other. They're really one and the same.
When you look at that, what is your best evidence for it?
When you start looking at, you have like the scientists, Hameroff and Penrose, Roger Penrose, the physicist, the Penrose stairs, all of that. They have been showing here in recent years that consciousness to them in their research is actually stored in the microtubules in the brain. And then when the body passes, the consciousness goes off back into the cosmos. Now, they can't tell you exactly where into the cosmos it goes, but they do believe that it goes somewhere. So, to me, it's fascinating. You're having scientists talking about these concepts that, spirituality has been talking about for millennia, but back in the day, it was your scientists that had been talking about it because they were your priests as well.
It did. Okay. And so I love this, but a portal or access to other dimensions, is that geographically dependent? Is it location dependent? Or are they creating these portals? Are they natural, or is it something that they develop themselves?
Yeah. So you have, it's both. You have naturally occurring portals. So the difference between a portal and a Stargate, for instance, so a portal is something that's naturally occurring in nature that is basically a gateway into whether it's another dimension, point in the cosmos, point in time, these sorts of things. We have portals, X points, what they call them, right there out in space, that allow protons and electrons from the sun to enter into the Earth faster. And what's fascinating about those, there's no predictive model for it. Even though they've had satellites up there for the last 10 years studying these things, they can't tell you when they're going to open, how big they're going to open up at, when they're going to close, none of that. But NASA admits these are naturally occurring portals. A Stargate is a intelligent being, could be human, could be another intelligent being that has harnessed the power of a portal to use it at their means, or at their will. So you have both of these concepts that are applicable. Now, there are certain sites in the world where this is easier to do. So, where you have your significant earth energy, these hotspot areas of the globe that, I mean, we're familiar with a lot of these different ancient sites of power, whether that's the pyramids or a lot of these stone circles. They were built on these type of energetic hotspots, which takes us all the way back to the Earth's core and what's within the planet. So, we're talking a spinning molten ball of iron that creates an electromagnetic field, which is wonderful because that protects us from the sun. But as it's passing through the Earth's mantle and crust, it's interacting with different metals and minerals. And depending on the metal or mineral and the quantity of it, creates different localized electromagnetic fields. And this is what the ancients were tapping into for a variety of different purposes.
Now, okay, so I'm visualizing that side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there another version of it where you could step up to an object with, say, an image of a doorway or something,
mm-hmm.
and say the magic words?
Yeah, like a Ramamuro.
Open sense.
Yeah.
Open sesame.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's the legend there of as the indigenous tribes were being chased across the Andes by the conquistadors, that the last emperor took something out of his pocket, put it in the little notch in the back, activated the door, and walked right through.
Oh, so, yeah, those stories are Amare Muru in Peru. I gotta say, the legends and the stories behind it, which is this portal on the side of this hill. It's a red sandstone hill. It's a doorway to nowhere. That part is it's there. You can see that. It's the stories behind it, and also behind the hill. Have you been there?
I have not yet. That's going to be within the next couple of years. I'm going to be there.
Well, you know the site that I'm talking about, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the backside of this giant red sandstone rock, it's huge. Is a tunnel, and it goes through the rock to the back side of the said key portal that's on the front. The locals that are there's probably down at the bottom of the hill. It's in the middle of nowhere, by the way. Down at the bottom of the hill, there's about 50 houses. They've been guarding this for 1,000 years or longer, and the indigenous culture at the bottom of the hill blocked that tunnel off. Okay. It's now walled off. You can't get to it. You know why? People were disappearing from the village. Yeah. They're going into the tunnel and not coming out. So they're like, anybody seen Bob? Right. I'm serious. I'm being very serious. So you can.
Yeah, no, I totally believe it. Yeah, Bob went into the tunnel, never came back. Yeah.
Yeah. So they take it very serious. But when you look at this and you tie that to the stories out of the village and how they treat this site, but you can also tell that it's very spiritual. So you have that, right, where the legend is. You come up, you put your chin in the thing, and you say the magic words, whatever it is, and you're gone.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the Temple of the Seven Gates in Karnak, right? You've been to that?
Been there, yeah.
Woo, man, that's a pretty freaky. How do I say this? It's only designed for one thing.
Yeah.
Right. When you walk into the Temple of Seven Gates, which is, how big is that temple? I don't know, 20 feet by 20 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
Something like that.
The Stargates on that. Yeah. And you walk in the front door. That's all that's in there, man.
That's it.
Yeah.
You got the Seven Gates, and then back behind it,
the Tree of Life.
Right. Yeah.
With the 7 ankhs, by the way, which is kind of bizarre on the backside. But that was built for one thing and one thing only, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a portal, Stargate. Have Stargates all over. It's fascinating. When you walk around Karnak, most of the gateways throughout that temple complex are labeled as Stargates. So, yeah, this was a very, very active hotspot for this type of technology. And then straight across the Nile, you have Hatshepsut's mortuary temple, which has, to me, the most fascinating Stargate, all the way back in the Holy of Holies. And those two Holy of Holies, Hatshepsut's temple, all the way across the Nile, miles away, is lined up perfectly with the Holy of Holies there at Karnak Temple. And so you could have, beings coming through those Stargates, because they're both labeled as Stargates,
right,
to meet each other. So yeah, it's amazing.
I'll never forget the first time I walked into the Temple of the Seven Gates. I didn't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've been there, they've got guards, right? Armed, right? They protect us. And I did it on my birthday on October 10th. It was a special birthday present. And this is a site that, as Mike will tell you, you have to have very, very, very special permission and special access to get to this. Most people don't know about it. Anyway, so I don't know what to expect. And I walked in, and I'm serious. I looked at that wall. I went, oh, whoa. Yeah, that's a special.
Yeah, because you just see like these layers of the portals.
7 doors.
Yep, the 7 doorways. Yeah, and that's in the back corner of the Karnak Temple complex. And most of the traffic just stays like within the pillars. You have the walkway of the pillars up into the Holy of Holies, and that's it. That's all they do. But we go around that complex, the more interesting areas, because there are Stargates throughout. There's even the Red Shrine that's off there in the open air museum. That's Hatshepsut's shrine. That's also labeled there as a Stargate. Of course, you got Sekhmet back in there. So all these little places and Sekhmet's another one that's you need special permission to get into as well. So there's a lot of hidden secrets all throughout that area.
Isn't it interesting? For me, so let me ask you about my own experience.
Mm-hmm.
Once you see a portal, you see them everywhere. You know what I mean? Yeah. Once you see the identifiers, do you do that now? Do you just walk around?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's been kind of fun for us when we do the Stargates of Ancient Egypt tour, which, by the way, for your viewers and listeners, we're going back in November. Still some room, some space available for that. So
when is it?
It's November 11th through the 23rd, and yes, we will be back in time for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I did that last year in Peru.
Yeah,
I flew back on Thanksgiving Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was planes, trains, and automobiles on Thanksgiving Day. Yeah. Some things you can't make up, and I missed everything. And I got home, and man, I was just so upset. The year before in Peru, we had Thanksgiving in Peru.
Oh,
okay, that's fine. Yeah. Let's all get together, us Americans, and eat guinea pig or whatever we did for Thanksgiving. But that's different. But when you spend Thanksgiving in airports, no.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
No, that's a good point.
We're back a couple days before that. But to your point, not so much this last tour, but the tour beforehand, finding the Stargate symbolism became like a scavenger hunt.
Me too.
All over. Yeah, it's like, oh, there's one, and one's that is Muhammad Ibrahim, our guide. I mean, that's the name of his tour company, Sabatours, Stargate Tour.
Yep.
And those are the symbols that he uses for his tour company, and there are ones that we're.
I have the. You've got the Stargate T-shirt, right?
I have the T-shirt. Oh yeah,
I love that. But it's so true. Mm-hmm. So when I'm off with these groups, and I'm sure you're doing the same thing, I go off and I'm photographing portals because the group is doing their thing and they're seeing something for the first. Okay, that's great. That's fantastic. I'm off, and I'll hear them go, "Is Jimmy shooting portals again?" And I'll have people come up to because I see them everywhere. So all around the world, I have got a folder full of probably 1,000 different images that are pretty obvious, and they're all the same. And it doesn't matter. If it's Mesopotamia, Mike, if it's England, if it's Egypt, if it's Peru, if it's Bolivia, I've shot stuff in Alaska, Mexico, where it's all the same representation of what these are like. Is that the same way for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you find a lot of common symbolism. Now, the hieroglyphs that are used there in Egypt are going to be different because that was their own specific language to label Stargate. But you still find a lot of common symbolism, like the symbol of the spiral, which was the ancient symbol for portal, and you find that all over the world. Like every culture uses that symbol, and basically, that's just when you think about the energy of these areas. I mean, it's vortex energy that's coming up out of the ground. Well, what's a vortex? Well, think of like a
Right.
tornado or a whirlpool. It's that swirling energy, right? Or that, whether it's swirling wind or swirling water. For these sites, it's swirling energy. Well, if you were to look straight down that funnel, or take a slice out of it, or smash it down into a two-dimensional object, that's your spiral, and that's represented all over the world.
I was just at Pumapunku, and when you enter there, I could almost show you, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to take time to do this. But yeah, the H blocks, all that's great. But
Yeah.
next, at the entrance of Pumapunku, you have these 3-4 andesite slabs. They're giant. I don't know. They're 30 feet wide, 20 feet tall, 3 or 4 feet thick, and they're lying flat. They interlock, and you can see the key locks and just, okay. So anyway, this stretches across for like 150 feet. The first one, and they're like I said, they all interlock. They're giant. And I'm looking on video, and they're flat. Okay, and I'm looking, and there's what's in the middle of it? A friggin' spiral.
Nice.
And it's worn down. Right? Like this has been open to rain and the elements for thousands of years. But you get down to this angle, and it's probably 6 feet, the spiral, right? But
Yeah.
you just get at the right angle, and you can see it. There it is, plain as day.
There it is. Yeah.
Spiral.
Oh, it's fascinating. Just you find it in the most unexpected places sometimes too. So back in January, my partner Kate and I were just up here in Cleveland at the art museum. They had a special exhibit for it was, what do they call it, like demonology and this other stuff in Japanese culture. So we go in there to check out the artwork, and a lot of it, kind of had these creepy ghouls and that sort of thing. But on the one wall, they had this huge, long silk tapestry that basically told this story. And it was, what was it? Some story about going up the mountain or whatever. But they had this whole journey that they had to travel through. And part of that journey was through the sea, where they're having to battle these dragons. Now, in ancient Japanese and Chinese folklore, there's the Dragon Sea out there in Japan. In fact, it's not even that long ago, just back in the 1950s, that the Japanese government said, no, don't go out here. They were losing ships left and right throughout this area. It's basically, it's the Dragon Triangle. It's like the Bermuda Triangle, that sort of thing. But as you're looking at this scene of them fighting the dragons under the sea, right in the middle of the scene is the spiral. There it is.
So I thought you were going to go Godzilla. I thought you were gonna, yeah, they've been having those earthquakes out there lately.
Right. Yeah.
And I swear, I'm like, it's Godzilla. How crazy would it be? Now we talk about interdimensional and portals and everything. How crazy would it be, Mike, if something like Godzilla happened? I mean, like, for real. I mean, it's like, how nuts would that be, where it goes back and we go, oh, I guess the folklore and mythology wasn't so folklorish.
Right.
After all, I often think about that. What if something like that actually happened? And I'm not being trivial here. I'm just saying the ancients saw stuff. And we didn't discover dinosaurs in Montana until when?
Right.
The late 1800s, right? Before that, we didn't know what dinosaurs were or what a Tyrannosaurus Rex was. We didn't know about any of that stuff. But yet the images of dragons and what they are, that goes back to the beginning of man, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. You find that sort of iconography all over the place. And there's something to those folklore and legends. There's always truth embedded within those. And sure, maybe some of it's been embellished over the years and that sort of thing. I mean, we do that today, but you have to think about the ancient peoples and their telling of these stories and recording them. Their resources were limited. Today, I mean, we can mass produce all kinds of things, but back then, when you're talking about they're going to paint something, or they're going to carve something, or they're going to write something down, the whole process just to make ink, it was a really, really long, involved process just to do that. And then, of course, if you're going to carve it into stone, that's also very, very time consuming. So this was something that had to be really thought out. What is it that we want to record? And so I can't believe that they are everything that was involved, that we're just going to create a completely fictional story that has no basis in truth whatsoever. It doesn't make sense.
That imagination was going to be the basis of all of that.
Yeah.
I totally get that. I did a search once, and I promise everybody we're going to talk about Atlantis, okay? But this is just me and Mike doing our thing. I did a search once. I encourage everybody to do this. Did a search once for dragons, but not your common search for dragons. I searched for dragons in family crests.
Oh, interesting.
I did dragons on country flags. I did search for dragons in countries, in logos, dragons in flags. And so I did this whole, and oh my, right? And we're talking about things that stretch back a long ways.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
But these countries all around the world that technically at some point didn't have any contact with each other, they had dragons representing them. So you have to ask yourself, what were they seeing? And is it an interdimensional? They saw something quickly and then it was gone? Or what was it, an undiscovered species? I don't know. But they were seeing something, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the fascinating things that you find about really all of these stories throughout our history. And we were talking the shadow people earlier, and that's something that I put together throughout that particular book. Is here's all these stories from all of these different countries throughout the world that we're not supposed to have had any connection to each other for thousands and thousands of years, basically talking about the same phenomenon, talking the same story. So yeah, you see that with the dragons, you see that with all kinds of different beings, whether they're interdimensional or there might be some sort of ghostly apparition or whatever it is. They're all talking about the same thing. They might have a different name for it. Of course, they might have a little bit of legend and lore back behind it as well. But they're all talking about the same phenomenon. They all saw these same things. And, even when you take a look at, since we will get into Atlantis at some point, when you talk about, the great cataclysm, the flood and all that, almost every culture on Earth has that same story. So they are telling the same story.
Now, I don't think this is a stretch. A lot of anthropologists and archaeologists and historians will say, transatlantic culture back then, transoceanic, transpacific. They didn't have boats. They didn't have a way to do this, so they didn't have contact with each other. Therefore, the development of these ideas was just in the DNA. It was inevitable. It was going to happen anyway. But then if you back up and look at the concept of portals, maybe it wasn't boats. Maybe they were going from continent to continent the easy way, teleporting, jumping through a portal and visiting each other all around the planet. That's not that much of a stretch, is it? I don't think it is. And actually, there has been some more recent research that's been coming out lately that has actually shown evidence of some of these longer voyages across the waters, like Easter Island to the mainland of South America, or even other cultures getting to Easter Islands. They were able to make these long hauls in the boats, and so it's not that far of a stretch that much anymore. They're starting to show that happening. But as far as like portals and things like this, because you find a lot of similar
whether it's architecture. A lot of people are familiar with, Chichen Itza looking a heck of a lot like the step pyramid there at Saqqara. We talked about the spiral symbol being all over the place, or you could talk about the handbags or the pine cones that are used all over the world in basically the same context. So if these cultures had no connection with each other, then how are they using the same symbolism? How do they have the same architecture? And we even find in Egypt, on Elephantine Island, there's a couple of temples there. The one at the top of the hill, which was built by Hatshepsut, completely obliterated, except for the gateway. The gate is still there. And so this is supposed to be one of our Stargates. But down the hill, temple built by Thutmose III, Temple of Khnum. As you walk back into there, to the as you're on your way to the Holy of Holies, this is a small temple, but there's a depiction there of this individual putting a necklace or an amulet onto the king so that it can protect the king on the way into the Holy of Holies. But this person that's putting the necklace on them wearing this Mayan headdress. Now, what in the world?
It is one of the craziest things I have ever seen. And you don't see that anywhere in Egypt. I have seen that. I have stopped. You just go, oh, what?
Yeah, what is that doing there? But it makes sense if the Stargate's right up the hill. Come on down.
Right up the hill, next to that pile of crazy granite rubble. By the way, that is, next to the stairs as you're going up. That's pretty amazing. Yeah,
everything just completely obliterated. Because you look at that setup of that temple as you're walking into it. The front half of it, and even though there's no walls and all that's gone, it's neat, it's orderly, it's fine. But once you pass that gate, everything is just obliterated, knocked over, knocked out. It's like some little kid with his building blocks just swiped them all and knocked them all down.
Giant, huge blocks of granite.
Yeah,
just
like
cast about
20, 30 tons.
Just cast about. And then right behind it, the gateway at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And
have you been to the pyramid back there too?
I have. I've been all over that island a couple of times. When you stand up under the gateway at the top of the hill and you overlook both sides of the Nile, right? Mm-hmm. And is that about the most majestic view on planet Earth? Just standing there and looking at that.
Yeah, that's a great view. Absolutely. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Now here's the other thing, talking about portals. Now I've thought about this. Okay, there's two things about Elephantine Island that blow my mind. Mm-hmm. Number one, the Germans. That was their right. Yeah. That was it. Hitler was looking for the Ark. This is right this is Indiana Jones, but in real life. This is the real thing. So you go by and the German archaeological office building is still there, right? And so it is
the longest tenured excavation in Egypt.
It's right there, man.
Right there.
It's crazy. So anyway,
going on for like 40, 50 years, however long it's been going on.
Yeah. So there's that, right? And then there's the second part of Elephantine Island, which explains a lot about the rubble to me. Is the Ark of the Covenant is there. Yeah.
A lot of people do believe it is. Have you gotten into that little
I cannot confirm nor deny. I cannot. I have been sworn to secrecy on that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we were sworn not to show any photos, but I was never sworn that I couldn't talk about it.
Okay. I'm already uncomfortable, man. It's hot in here. It's hot. It's hot. But that's what's so special about that island. That island, there is something about it. You can feel it. And the Germans and the Nazis were certainly interested, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. And you got to think, Elephantine Island is basically a massive block of itself of Aswan rose granite sticking up out of the Nile. So it is just absolutely loaded with energy. It's a prime location for portals because, Aswan rose granite being 55 to 60% quartz, that's immediately a conductor for the electromagnetic energy to charge all of this. So yeah, it's a perfect location.
Yeah,
and right in the middle of the Nile, so you have water as that conductor as well. Yeah.
Right. You know what happened? Okay, we're gonna swing this right back to Atlantis. We started to get there. But one of the coolest things, I know this, okay, I'm just gonna make this really brief. I don't know if this happened to you, but so we've got like 3 boats we're taking out to Elephantine Island, right? And we're cruising. We have a documentary film crew, and we're doing all the stuff. And these kids, 3 little boys on a surfboard in the middle of the frigging Nile River, come paddling up to us on the surfboard. They're little kids, man. They're like 5 years old, 6
singing
years
a song,
old, singing, right?
Yeah.
And they're coming up and they grab onto the boat and they start singing Dock of the Bay or whatever, right? And I'm like, man, you know, and they help, and they sang to us all the way to Elephantine Island, you know, come up onto I got to tell you now, parents in the United States would get arrested if their kids were doing that.
These days, about 40 years ago now, but these days,
but this is today in the middle of the Nile. You've got ships, you've got boats, it's the Nile River, and these little boys are on a surfboard.
Yeah. It's a completely different culture. And I tell people this all the time. When you go to Egypt, it's a life-changing experience, and not just because you're going to see these magnificent pyramids and temples and the Stargates and all that, but you learn a lot about the culture. And those kids are, you know, they're trying to, you know, scrap a few, it was amazing. Scrap a few bucks together here, you know?
Yeah, they got some money out of it. They tapped me pretty good. I couldn't believe it. I turned to the kid. I go, okay, Freebird on 4. One. It was amazing. Those kids were amazing.
Yeah, they were.
So back to Atlantis, though, when we're talking about portals and this type of technology, technology today we equate to this stuff. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Computer, cell phones, all that. Yeah.
Sure. And what we are doing right now.
Yep.
What would we if we went to Atlantis and looked around, would we notice the technology, or did it come in a different form?
Yeah, it came in a different form. I would think I think we would recognize that there is a technological quality to it, but very, very different from ours. I mean, like you were saying, you know, the cell phone, computers, all that. I think the traditional academia, when we, in our field, is kind of being that alternative view. When we start talking about the ancients having quote unquote high technology, their brains automatically go to the cell phones and all that. It's like, no, we're not talking that type of high technology. They had a different type of high technology. Their civilization, when it grew up, just went a different route than ours today. Once that cataclysm happened and obliterated everything, you know, civilization had to restart, and it went a different path. Back then, there was something else, and we don't quite understand what all of that technology was. We see some remnants of it, of, you know, the great monuments that they built, and we don't quite understand how they built them, but it was that technology that they used in order to build it. And I think if we were to go back in time and actually view it, we'd be like, oh, wow, that's pretty amazing. Yes, that is high tech. We can't do that.
Because we went the route of the steam engine.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? We went that way. The pursuit of electricity.
Very, very industrial. Yeah.
Yeah. Very industrial, smelting and things. But we could have very easily gone the other direction, like you're suggesting here with another civilization, where we understand science today when it talks about particles and entanglement and dimensions. But if we started there as a civilization, we would have gone in a completely another direction, like what would have happened at Atlantis, right?
Right. Well, let me give an example here. So, you know, okay, going back, or just, take an example of a construction project today. We're going to have like a bunch of scaffolding all around it, right? We will recognize that, okay, they're building something over here. we could go back to Atlantis. We see some depictions of this, throughout ancient Egypt, where they're using the Waz scepters to do things like levitate the temple and these sorts of things. So we could possibly go back in time and take a look at a construction project and not really understand what it is. We might see like a whole set of guys standing there with these scepters, and there are these blocks floating in air, and maybe it has something to do with magnetics or electromagnetism. We don't understand quite how it works, but there they would be, doing this sort of thing. We'd go, wow, that's impressive. Might even seem like magic to us.
This is my twisted brain, Mike, which you understand, but let's just expose it a little bit. Here's the crazy part about this entire discussion. When an archaeologist says, well, you're not understanding. Yeah, it's an impressive structure, but it's just really fine craftsmanship. And I go, bullshit. And the reason why, I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you by using very adult words, but here's the problem. Every culture in the world that has built a megalithic something crazy has never told us how they did it.
Nope.
Not one.
You will not find the building plans for the pyramids anywhere.
Anything. Peru, Chaco Canyon. I don't care. Pick it. It doesn't matter. Stonehenge.
But you can find a recipe for beer.
Yeah, you can find that. You can find taxes. You can find the minutia of the day.
It's selling goats and things like that. Yeah,
all of that. But how they built a temple, how they moved this, how they carved this, how they did this, how they did. There isn't a written record for anything anywhere. I have a big issue with that.
Yeah.
So it must be something else. If it was mechanical, levers, right? The wheel, mastodons, I don't know, mammoth, woolly mammoth, pulling this stuff through, slaves with whips and whatever. Okay. I think that would be written down.
Yeah.
They
would depictions of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't find it anywhere, which is one of the big reasons why. One of the big reasons why I say, like the larger pyramids out there in Egypt, I don't think the dynastic Egyptians built them, because not only do we find no record of them building, there's no hieroglyphs on there. It's a very, very different construction than the smaller pyramids. The smaller pyramids, you find hieroglyphs inside. They're also mostly made of mud brick, and they're all falling apart. So completely different construction material than the bigger pyramids. And I think it's, the dynastic Egyptians came along, and it might've been, their Atlantean ancestors. So I know that, a lot of the Egyptian antiquities authorities, a lot of pride there. They're like, those are our pyramids. We built them. It's like, well, maybe your old ancestors before the dynastics did, but the dynastics didn't. I think they came along, saw those, and were like, those are freaking cool. I want to be able to build that. I can't. I have no idea how those were built, but it would be awesome to be buried in something like that. So I think they mimicked them.
When it comes to Senefru, which there's a lot
which his name means restorer. So
there's a lot of reverence put on him. All right. Okay. All right. That part is fine. But here is the connection with him to all of that. And it's only one little piece of graffiti in the mortuary temple at the end of the canal in Saqqara.
Yeah.
And that graffiti was done at around 1500 BC by a priest who went there and said, I'm here at the temple of Senefru.
Yeah.
Right?
And
that's it. Everything else, there's no Senefru anywhere. Right? It's like really on all the big stuff, we know nothing.
Yeah. And the thing is that you can do that with any building. You take a house that somebody lived in, 50 years ago, or I could say, okay, here's actually a good example. I got it. Okay. So the house that I consider my grandparents' house was not originally my grandparents' house. I consider it my grandparents' house. Today it is my uncle's house. So people would say, oh yeah, I went to Chuck's house. Okay. Well, I went to my grandparents' house. For my dad and my uncle, that was for a time their parents' house, and they would address it as that, but it was also their grandparents' house. It was the house that my grandmother grew up in. So it's like, throughout all these ages, you could attribute a different person to that building, and every single time you'd be correct. But it's just, which era are you talking about?
Well, when we look at Khufu's stele, right? Which, by the way, that stele, which is in Giza, it's on the plateau, but it's in an iron box, padlocked, right? It just sits there, right? And it's sealed. But allegedly, a few people have seen that stele, and it's been transcribed. I think that the reason why they don't have that out for public viewing or for further scrutiny is because it says, I'm here repairing the pyramids.
It was a restoration project.
It was a restoration project. Yeah.
And there is technically, hieroglyphs there in what they call the chambers above the
relieving chambers.
The relieving chambers. Yeah, I was like, I knew it's an R word. Yeah, the relieving chambers. Painted red. And Howard
ochre
found it. Yeah, right. And you don't find this anywhere else throughout the pyramids. And a lot of people do believe, and there are a lot of academics that actually believe it too, that Howard Weiss, he's trying to keep his some grant money to keep going on his expeditions, and he was tasked with figure out who built this and when, and you threw it up there real quick. Just
he did. I think that the evidence is clear there. Today, Howard Weiss would be in prison.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that he hoaxed that. When you look at Weiss's journals, he's practicing in his journal, right? But alongside in his notes, he's practicing the Khufu cartouche.
Yeah.
And he's
and so it makes sense that then he suddenly throws it up there to try to prove his.
And he was the one to find it. He dynamited his way.
Blasting his way in there. Jeez.
Yep. And it's because, first off, he was a criminal anyway. He was already a felon back in the UK, and he was fleecing people for money. So what does he want to do? He wants to find mummies inside of the Great Pyramid.
He's looking for treasure.
He's looking for treasure, and he happens to go the only spot. By the way, that graffiti up there that was written on the wall that he practiced writing is only in that one possible spot between the bricks, between the blocks, to write something.
Right.
There isn't on any other block, anything else. There's 5 relieving chambers. There's no other graffiti. It's only in that one spot, on that one place. Yeah. And there was a German team that went up there.
Oh yeah, then they scraped off some of the paint. Yeah, they got in trouble for that.
Arrested. Yeah, they got arrested, man. They got arrested. Yeah. I love ancient Egypt. There's
so
something
much
about it. When what do you think about? We need to take a break. I'm going to set you up for this. I want you to think about this while we go away for a break. What would be easier? Don't answer. This is the question, and then we'll follow up when we get back. What would be easier for the world to handle? The knowledge that Atlantis was real, or that we are being visited by ET? Don't answer. That's our question when we come back. Our guest tonight, the one and only Mike Ricksecker. We're talking about portals, Atlantis, time travel, and all of that other fun stuff. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut.
Jimmy Church, Gaia TV, Fade to Black, here at Machu Picchu with Brian Forster and Hidden Inca Tours. Amazing tour so far, Brian, but we're here to announce what we're going to do next year in 2026. What's going on?
Okay, November 2026, we're going to have our major tour of Peru and Bolivia, either a pre or post tour of Paracas and Nazca on the coast. And then after that, 6 days in Easter Island.
Bucket list, Easter Island. Come join Brian and I and his amazing team here at Hidden Inca Tours for Peru, Bolivia, and Easter Island. Signing out. Say goodbye, Brian.
Bye, gang.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right, welcome back. River Moon Coffee. Just go to Amazon. Go to Amazon, search Fade to Black Coffee, click, go, and get yourself some Fade to Black Coffee by River Moon. It's absolutely amazing. Visit the Amazon store. It's very simple to do. Just search Fade to Black Coffee. It's right there. You'll see my picture. Yeah, get yourself some River Moon Coffee. Our guest tonight, the one and only Mike Ricksecker. And getting straight back to it, Mike, the question is, what would be easier for the world to handle? The knowledge of Atlantis being real or E.T. visiting this planet? What say you?
Yeah, I think probably that Atlantis was real because it keeps us here on Earth. I think the idea of, great cataclysm, a lot of people are familiar with that story with, the Great Flood, and, a lot of cultures have shared that story. It does, kind of, rock the traditional academia a bit. But when it comes to extraterrestrials, and probably the idea of extraterrestrials visiting Earth, people are starting to, warm up to, especially over the last 20 years, even probably more so here over the last 5. But I think it's going to still take a while for people to warm up to that idea. If you're comparing to Atlantis, I think Atlantis will win that one.
Really? I'm kind of the opposite.
All right.
Kind of the opposite. Yeah. Let's say something crazy happens, like all of the ice melts in Antarctica, right? And we can certainly address that. And then a 1,000,000-year-old city is revealed. I don't know if the planet can handle that, man. I don't know if Plato's version of things and that comes out. I think that's too much for people to handle. The question of us being alone in the universe. No, I think everybody is kind of.
Your question was a little different, though. That because your question was the extraterrestrials.
What would be easier to handle? Yeah, I think.
Because I think people. Yeah, I think knowing that extraterrestrials exist and another planet out there in the cosmos has life. I think most people are on board with that. It's the probability of something else being out there, another intelligent life form, is high, right? But your question was if they were visiting, and I think people are uncomfortable with that notion because if they have been visiting, it's been in secret and that sort of thing. So that kind of creates this sort of intrusive sort of atmosphere, like, oh, they've been sneaking onto the planet, that sort of thing. So I think people would be uncomfortable with that, where uncovering a lost city because the ice melted. Okay. We find lost cities all the time underwater and that sort of thing. Not necessarily as, that you could say are Atlantis, but,
me personally, I would lose it if finally the proof of Atlantis or another civilization surfaced. I would lose it. E.T. Okay, all right. Well,
Jimmy, we probably are already looking at that evidence of Atlanteans whenever we go into the pyramids. I think that's it right there.
Yeah, for sure. You know why? It's the dogma. It's the dogma that we have been fed for so many years, that at 3000 BC in Mesopotamia and in Giza, that was the start of everything. Right. And that's it. And that dogma has turned into truth. Now we know about Göbekli Tepe, and now we know about these other ancient sites that predate by a large margin Giza, Mesopotamia. But even that has taken a while to get a foothold. Zahi Hawass is still in denial about all of that.
Oh my gosh! Don't get me started on him. Yeah, well,
I didn't mean to do that
narrative. Yeah,
I didn't mean to do that. But the dogma, because it has fed the kitty for so long,
right,
that would be part of the shock value with everybody going, "What? We've been lied to." There was something that came before.
People would definitely be upset. Yeah, I think it would be, how do they break it, right? Because if it comes out that, Atlantis existed and we've known about it, and all of these academics have been lying to you about it all these years, people are going to be very, very upset about it. But if it comes out as more of, oh, there's new evidence that shows that this is actually that old and is proof of an even older civilization, I think people would be, more ready to accept that. It's all in the presentation.
Do you think Plato was right or partially right?
Well, the thing about Plato is that it wasn't Plato's story. He was passing that down. It was, came from Solon, who was an earlier Greek philosopher who had made the trip to Egypt and got the story from the priests there. So Solon goes back in 600 BC. He's hanging out at the Temple of Sais. He's hanging out in Heliopolis. He's talking to these different priests. Sanches was one. According to Plutarch, one of them was named Sanches. And he's talking to these guys and getting these different stories. And so it's kind of funny because Solon starts telling the Egyptian priests about, there was this great cataclysm. He's telling the Greek story of the great cataclysm. And the priests say, oh, no. And they start laughing at him. you Greeks are but children. There have been many cataclysms that have happened again and again throughout the ages, and you guys only remember this one because it completely wiped you out and was your sheep herders up in the mountains that had to come back down and redevelop civilization, and they didn't know any better. So it's a fascinating story, and that previous cataclysm that the priests were talking about at that time in Egypt happened 9,000 years beforehand. It's written right there, 9,000 years beforehand. So you put the numbers together. Okay, Solomon was there in 600 BC, and the story was 9,000 years before that. That's 9600 BC. That's right at the end of the Younger Dryas era when you had the warming and all of that. So yeah, it fits right in with the way that we know that the Earth worked. So yeah, that's when
and it falls right on top of Göbekli Tepe. It's kind of a weird thing, and also the origin stories for Egypt in general. When you go to, it's depicted on a couple of different temple walls.
Yeah, Edfu is the most significant. And here's the thing is, we get kind of hung up on Plato and Atlantis. So academics say, well, Plato was talking about, it was a contemporary story to him. So like, they talk about Santorini and all this. No, because of that 9,000 years. But the thing is, they didn't call it, the ancient Egyptians didn't call it Atlantis. The Greeks like to change the names of things. So like Egypt was never called Egypt, but that's what the Greeks called it. The city that we know is Luxor today because the Arab nations changed it from Thebes. Well, that was a Greek name for it. The original name was Waset. That was the Egyptian name. So they like to change the names around. So it was never called Atlantis. According to the ancient Egyptians, when you read the story on the walls of the Temple of Edfu, it was called the homeland of the primeval ones. And that suffered the massive cataclysm with water and fire, and they had to flee from that area and redevelop their civilization. It's the Atlantis story right there.
Egypt, and that timeline is also 10,000 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything lines up perfectly.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. Now, when we talk about Atlantis and its location on Earth, where are you with this?
Yeah, and that's the one everybody wants to know. Where was it? And I mean, really, it's Atlantis itself as a civilization was most of the world. What people really want to know is, where was the famous capital city that had all the rings? That's what people want to know. And that was a little bit tougher to answer. We, as written from what we have from Plato, just past the Pillar of Hercules and all that. So it seems like it should be out there in the Atlantic somewhere. Does it have some sort of relationship to the Azores or whatever? Maybe. But the Atlantean civilization itself spread all throughout the Mediterranean, into Asia, across northern Africa, into Europe. Of course, you have some speculation that it even went as far as like North America, or even down to Antarctica.
What about the Indian Ocean or heading out into the Pacific? Lots of thoughts with that too.
Yeah. When you start getting out there, that's when the terminology starts to change into Lemuria, which a lot of people say was a different culture altogether, that the Lemurians were more peaceful and the Atlanteans were more corrupt and this sort of thing. So possibly two different cultures living at the same time, because you look at some of the indigenous legends here. So in the American Southwest, where like the Zuni and the Hopi and their stories there around like Montezuma's Well, where during the Great Cataclysm that the humans fled to that area, and you had the ant people that took them into their caves, or down in Montezuma's Well, into some sort of hidden area there, possibly even another dimension if they pass through some sort of portal, to help save the humans until the water subsided and they could come back to the earth. They didn't specifically use the name Lemurians, but a lot of people have looked at that story and said, well, they were coming from basically the Pacific region into here, so these could have possibly been the Lemurians.
Now, what do you make of the research of the Eye of the Sahara?
So yeah, the reshot structure. I think it's a natural geological structure. It's missing a lot of things that you would expect. When you look at the description of the island of Atlantis, it's missing a lot of the mountainous area that was there on the island. You don't have the channel that was supposed to go through from that, basically where the center of the whole ring structure was, out to what would be the sea. There were also many canals that came down out of the mountains, and there was like a whole canal system back behind the ringed area. And so this was supposed to be for sending timber and things like this down toward the sea. None of that is there. You also find no ruins there's no buildings, no ruins of buildings or foundations or any sign of human habitation there. So it's missing a lot of things, but it's a very cool ringed structure. That's about all it has.
It's definitely concentric. It's definitely concentric. I find it intriguing, but here anything is possible. And when I look at this, is where I back up and go, okay, yeah, it could be, and this is why. We have about 2 billion years of habitable Earth time, not 4.5 billion. Before that, the atmosphere was different. It wasn't breathable.
Right, yeah.
Lava, the surface temperatures and all of that.
Yeah, turned into snowball Earth for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But we have about 2 billion years, and that's a long time. And so when you look at different ideas, like a hardy species, how long does a hardy species last? Like a shark, you've got 75 million years there. Most are 1 million years. Some go extinct, some don't. But humans, human Homo sapien, we've got a couple 100,000 years. The rise and fall of civilizations like Rome or Greece or Egypt or whatever, they rise and fall in 1,000 years or so.
Yeah.
Right. So those are very short periods of time. So if you look at how a civilization would develop and a species would develop and then fall, you could probably look at, because we're about to wrap this thing up ourselves right now. So anyway, let's say it's 200,000 years, but in a 2 billion year linear timestamp, you could slice out a rise and fall of civilizations one after another, and the possibility of that would be buried under miles of Earth now, and we would have no evidence of it. So I consider that when we look at something like the Eye of the Sahara or any other idea about a past civilization, I think it could have happened hundreds of times, don't you?
Yeah, and I think we're going to find a lot of those answers buried deep underground. And that's when, really lately, that's when we have found a lot of these more significant discoveries these days, is when there's some sort of massive construction project, whether it's for a new road or a new building or something like this. And all of a sudden, they've got the backhoes in there okay, we found, all these, interesting artifacts.
Stop building the highway.
Yeah, stop building the highway. It was just there some years back now around the San Diego area where they found that mastodon that had the cuts in it that, it was like, oh, this is actually sign of human activity.
150,000 years ago.
150,000 years. Yeah. So completely rewrites history. So it's going to be buried deep within the ground. So so when we start looking at things like the scans that are coming out now of structures,
what do you make? Let's stop right there. Let's just pump the brakes. Let's go back to Giza really quick.
Sure.
What's your overall? Okay, no. Let's back up to when the story broke. All right. The story breaks a couple of months ago.
Yep.
3 months ago. 2 kilometer deep structures under the Great Pyramid. The story breaks. What goes through your mind?
Get Trevor on my show. Trevor Grassi, who's the guy that basically broke the story for the Coffer Project, was on my Stargates tour a couple of years ago. So I'm getting on the phone with Trevor. Like,
yeah,
what's
Trevor's
going on?
a good guy.
Yeah.
I've been asking Trevor for a few years now, way before all of this stuff, to come on the show because I just think he's a nice guy. He's
a great guy, and he was really hesitant at first.
He doesn't want to. He's like, Jimmy, you don't understand. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah, he was really hesitant at first. And I'm trying to get him back because I did get him on my show. I'm trying to get him back, and he's really overwhelmed. Yeah,
did he wear his hat?
No, he did not wear the hat for my show.
Oh,
no.
He didn't. Oh, wow,
he did not. No.
Okay, so 3 months ago, the story breaks. What do you think? What goes through your mind?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I was doing was, okay, let me do a little, research. Let me start searching around, get some, what's there to back this up? Where's it coming from? Because it was basically just post online, and so it took a little digging around. Talk to Trevor. Oh, this is where it came from. The problem was that so much of it was in Italian. You went to Nicole Ciccolo's YouTube and she's a forensic analyst on the team, and it's like, oh, here it is. Oh crap, it's in Italian. I can't listen to it. So it made it a bit challenging. So yeah, trying to get that confirmation was the first thing. And as it kind of slowly started to come out and talking with Trevor, okay, this is what's going on here. Yeah, the problem was you had people immediately, like our buddy Zahi, immediately, it's fake news. And it's like, well, wait a second here. You're actually talking about real scientists that used real technology. They performed these real scans, and they had a real press conference. There's nothing fake about that. So you can debate the findings. And they were having like ground penetrating radar analysts coming out saying, or specialists saying, no, the GPR can't go that low. And when you actually start to look into the technology, which I did start researching the technology, that's not how it works. It's not GPR. They are.
Can you help me understand how it does? Sure. How the technology works?
Yeah, SAR technology basically is from the satellite. And what they are doing, they're doing a surface scan, which kind of seems bizarre since you're like, well, we're trying to get like kilometers deep. But basically what it is scanning the surface for are these micro vibrations that voids create from underground. And based on the measurement of these micro vibrations, they're able to detect where voids are and how deep they are. And they haven't only used this on the Giza Plateau, they have used this elsewhere to like some of their first tests of this were a lab that they have there in Italy, which is like 1.5 kilometers underground. And lo and behold, here's like this perfect scan of this underground lab that they took from these satellites in space with this technology. So it's fascinating how it works. And yeah. So what I can say, because a lot of people want to know, okay, are these like the halls of Amenti? That was kind of the big thing at the time. The Egyptian underworld, we don't know. We have to go down there and take a look. But there are some sort of voids under the Giza Plateau. And to me, that makes sense because we already know there's voids all over the Giza Plateau, like the Osiris shaft. And you just go walking around and you're like, oh, I can't go here. There's, this place is walled off because there's a pit right there. And, we already know this stuff is there.
But a construction 2 kilometers deep.
Massive, yeah.
Today's technology, 2 kilometers, man, deep. That is insane engineering.
It is the insane engineering. But look at the Great Pyramid. That's insane engineering.
Absolutely. No, I
think it's part of the functionality of that whole plateau. Like maybe it was what helped to power and make the pyramids function. I mean, this all speculation, but I believe it's all tied in together to make whatever this thing was work.
So to suggest, okay,
built
because
by the Atlantis.
We've got to look at a couple of different things here, and trying to stay objective, because we have the orthodox academic way of looking at the Great Pyramid. We have that. All right. Okay. the flip side of that is if there is a construction that goes 2 kilometers deep underneath the Great Pyramid and possibly other locations around the world, but underneath the Great Pyramid, then that would suggest a technological civilization that we cannot comprehend. And that certainly tips over everything, doesn't it?
It would, yeah, because this is, far and above something. I mean, yeah, we do some of these things today. We have large cavernous areas that we have excavated, and we like secret government installations. Of course, I don't know about that. Yeah, so it would put a modernist stamp to what the ancients were doing. To create something that huge or that big. Or here's the other idea is, were they repurposing something that may have already been there? Was there already a large cavernous void there? I mean, the whole thing is limestone, so it's a sedimentary rock. But, did that sediment form in a way that created, large cavernous areas under there, and they discovered them and maybe repurposed them, kind of refined them to their own usage, whatever that usage was.
Now, what about the creative artistic license that has been applied to what this may be? The columns, the stairways, and those kinds of details. What do you make of that? Is that just imagination?
Well, it's not imagination because it's based off of the scans. So I think it is a little bit of creative license. What could this possibly be? It's columnistic in nature. The kind of spiraling feature, is that a stairway? We don't know. We'd have to go and take a look. It could possibly be. And we do that as humans. We look at something, we try to make sense in our own context as far as what it could possibly be. And so that's the way it was interpreted by those particular artists.
Now, it appears that there's something under Khafre, and now they're pointing at Menkaure too as well.
Right, Menkaure, and also the Egyptian labyrinth down there in Fayum, or Hawara. Yeah. So, man, I'm not surprised by any of this. I've always hoped for something like this, but my dream, if I was Bill Gates, if I was Elon Musk, you know where I put my money? Vacuum cleaners. Yeah, vacuum cleaners. That's what I would do. I would start getting rid of the sand. And I really, when they were scanning the desert, remember when they were doing that not too long ago from aircraft? I thought that was a great idea. And they were finding stuff. They were finding stuff, yeah.
Yeah, they were finding stuff. And I thought, man, why it's sand, right? We're not moving a mountain of granite, right? Or we're not moving Everest. We need to move sand from one location to another. And I don't understand, is there a fear about what would be revealed? Is Zahi Hawass so concerned about his version of things when it comes to Egypt that there are secrets that he just doesn't want revealed?
Well, you got to remember, once Zahi starts talking, it's all, got to read my book.
I know.
Which is nuts. But yeah,
it's in my book. It's in my book.
It's in my book. It's in my book. Yeah. I mean, and I get part of it. He's had a career that is spanned 40, 50 years, and so it's a lot of pride, a lot of egotism. He doesn't, for him personally, he doesn't want his career to be seen as wasted. And as far as then we were talking about earlier, there's a national pride, like these are ours, we built these, that sort of thing, and I understand that. But here's the thing: is I think you kind of need to put a little bit of that ego aside. Acknowledge, okay, I've done good work here. And Zahi has done a lot of good work over the years. He's not all bad, right?
And he's actually smart.
Yeah, he's very, very smart.
Yeah.
But I think we need to realize, all of us, we're just stepping stones for the next generation. Where we are today, we could not have gotten without our predecessors. And we look back at a lot of those guys from 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and we kind of laugh like, oh my gosh, what were these guys thinking? You know, they were so far out of left field, and they had some really wild, bizarre ideas about, you know, the way the world worked. But, you know, they came up with innovations during their time, during their era, that got us to where we are now. And the same thing is true of us. You know, my book here, Portals to the Stars, I expect in 20 years is going to be outdated, but it's, you know, hopefully going to inspire others to, you know, think outside the box,
having an open mind
and taking the next step. And so, yeah, prove me wrong 20, 30, 40 years from now, whatever. But hopefully there's something in there that inspires the next generation to keep it going. We're just stepping stones for the next generation. I think he needs to realize that.
I remember it's probably 7 years ago, the video of Zahi arguing with Graham Hancock.
Oh gosh, that was
and
yep.
Zahi actually saying, "What is this Gobekli Tepe you speak of? I've never heard of it." It's like, dude,
what are you doing? Yeah,
you know, because he doesn't want. It's tourism, it's money, it's Nat Geo funding of project, whatever it you know. He doesn't want that legacy disturbed.
Right, of course.
Nothing came before. There was nothing before Giza. We own the world, and that's it. And for him to say that's the exact problem that you're talking about, for him to say, what is this Gobekli Tepe? Dude, have an open mind. You're supposed to accept Gobekli Tepe. Gobekli Tepe supports your narrative.
Yeah.
If you just open it up and... You know what I mean?
It was like, you know, the whole redating of the Sphinx. I mean, that's one of the things that inspired me down this path. You know, watching Mystery of the Sphinx back in, you know, 93 when it came out. Shock and West. You know, there's Charlton Heston.
Yeah.
Great stuff. And it blew my mind.
I watched that like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, no, I will watch that every once in a while. I'll pop that back on. Yeah. It blew my mind back in the day. But, you know, you have these guys, you know, Mark Lehner, he's like, oh, we have nothing else. It's that old. Well, you know, Gobekli Tepe shows up a couple of decades later. But then he also kept throwing out there, well, you know, show us a potsherd. And it's like, you realize the Sphinx enclosure is, you know, it's all limestone, right? And even the dream stele, he talks about, you know, a restoration project. So we know that it's been restored many, many times. And if you're restoring a huge monument like that, you know, when it's finally done, you're going to have all the, you know, the big gala and the pageantry and all that stuff. So what are you going to do? You're going to sweep out your enclosure there. So how many times was that entire thing swept out, and whatever potsherd that may have been there from 6,000 years ago, 7,000, 10,000 years, it's going to be gone, right? Because how many times did it get cleaned out? So it was ridiculous arguments.
Yeah, Mark Lehner, I don't bag on anybody. I really don't.
Yeah, try not to.
But Mark, I try not to too. But Mark speaks really well. He's got a really good way of communicating. So whatever he says, it's very easy to accept.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right? Yeah. That sounds good. Yeah.
He's real, and he's got a CV and credentials. The dude hasn't left Giza in like 50 years. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And he's got that going for him.
Sure.
So when he speaks, but now so much evidence has surfaced, but he hasn't changed his tune.
Not at all.
And right. And the other part with Mark, I know he knows the real facts, and I'm sure that he has pondered how this possibly could have been done many times outside of his, you know,
outside the narrative that he has to
outside of the narrative, because this is where it gets complicated. The population of Egypt at 3000 BC, the country was 400,000 people.
Yeah.
In the country. Okay. So you look at their idea. This is my new documentary I'm putting together. I'm spilling the beans here. But so if you go with their 20 years, 20,000 people, right? Building the pyramids. It's stones every 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's their 2.5 million blocks. All right. That's what they have laid out there. If you go and look at, and there's a huge problem with this, but if you go with 500,000 people in the country at 2700 BC, half are men. So now we're down to 200,000 people. How many of those are able-bodied? Right? How many are 2 years old? How many are 70 years old? Right? Okay, so you got to get who can move stones. Now suddenly we're at this 20,000 number that's left in the entire country.
Not even just like that local area.
Right. Yeah. In the entire country. So who's governing? Who's in the army? Who's tending the fields? Who is farming? Who is doing is doing all of that? Right? Infrastructure, all of that. But everything was concentrated. Every able-bodied man in the country was building that pyramid. But here's the problem, and this is where Lehner doesn't tell the truth. Khafre and Khufu were built at the same time. They don't tell you that part.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that it wasn't 2.5 million stones. Well, actually, it was 5 million. They don't tell you that part. So they didn't have the population their version of the population. The population could have been different, could have been built at different times, all of that. But if you go with Lehner's, Mark Lehner's version of this, it doesn't fit the numbers. Logistically, it doesn't work. And if you back up 100 years before those two pyramids were built, they built 15 more pyramids in Saqqara. Right?
Yeah, here's the interesting thing about the Giza Plateau that people don't really think about, because it was all one huge, massive project, and you can just go by the original casing stones, which you can't see anymore. And if they were all back on there, you could see it plain as day, because there was a specific design to the whole thing. So we know that the Great Pyramid was all that solid, nice white limestone, right? All those are gone. We see some on the second pyramid of Khafre. We see some of that white limestone at the very, very top. But what's at the bottom there? It's granite. It's because this was a half and half pyramid. The top half was that white limestone. The bottom half was granite. Menkaure over there was all granite.
All granite. And those stones are still there around.
Those stones are there. And they tried, what was that, a couple of years ago? They were trying to
resurface that thing.
Yeah.
I was kind of excited. I was like, hold on, Mike, seriously. I was like, okay, let me see this one, man. Popcorn.
Good luck with that.
This I got to see. I watched Abu Simbel. I've seen that video. Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the casing stones.
Mm-hmm.
You were just commenting.
Yeah. I mean, when you see that there was a grand design to this whole thing, it wasn't just one king saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to stick up this pyramid over here," and there we go, and then another king, "Oh yeah, let me do mine over here." No, there was a grand design to this whole thing. This one color, half and half, and then the other color. That's a grand design across the whole plateau.
As I look at, again, back to Mark Lehner and those around him, and that includes Zahid, by the way, that have pushed the timeline and how the both Khafre and Khufu were built. People don't understand. If the world suddenly understood that those two pyramids were built at the same time, and it wasn't 20,000, now it's 40,000 or 50,000 people, and it's 5 million stones. The aspect of Aswan and the distance that is applied there, and how these materials were moved, that's when you step back and go, you know what? You've been lying to us, because that doesn't make sense. And so one of the things that for me, that erases, Mike, and again, this is a non-trivial point. What erases the population issue, what erases the tribes from the Sahara just wandering into Egypt and one day building this stuff, which is what they want us to believe, that just maybe they were already there.
They're already there.
Except that they were already there, and Lord knows how long they took or how they were done, but get away from your version of it, because the population of Egypt doesn't support what you suggest was done. And that's my take.
Yeah, there's so much other evidence, just the moving of the granite blocks. I mean, I get a lot of the limestone was, from around that area there by Giza, but the granite had to come from Aswan, and there's they just ferried it up the river, and we're talking blocks, even like, the obelisks, some of those are like 600, 700 tons. They just ferried them up the river, and it's like, do you realize it's not just putting it on a raft and saying, there you go, to be able to put that sort of block on a boat like that, even if we're going to say, okay, it's a boat, what you have to count for
the displacement,
the displacement, the balance, the ballast and the buoyancy, because to put that block on there, all of a sudden you have to make that rafter buoyant, otherwise it's going to just drop into the water there. So let's say you even had that. Well, okay, the ballast that you have to have before you even put that on there has to basically, you have to have that hydraulic system that we have in our modern day boats to be able to do that, to move that water in and out of the hull of the boat, to be able to accommodate the differences between having a 700-ton block on there and not having a 700-ton block on there. Because if you just said, okay, we're going to have all this buoyancy, all this air there within the hull, you're going to flip your boat before you even get the block on there. So you're telling me that the dynastic Egyptians had that kind of modern water displacement within the hull of their boats?
I'm looking at now, I'm looking at a barge that displaces 100 tons. You want to see the picture?
Yeah, let's take a look.
Okay, hold on. Check this out. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just going to label this 100 ton. You can look this up. You can just go online, barge that displaces 100 tons, and see this for yourself. But I'm going to pull this up. Now check this out. Oh man, I love this. This is friggin' crazy.
There you go.
That's it. Okay, so and just imagine, and you're right about bringing up a 600-ton obelisk, or the unfinished obelisk. What is that? 1,500 tons?
Something like that. And we haven't even addressed how did they actually move the block onto the boat. That we never talked about that. It was just keeping it afloat.
Right. So the relieving chambers. This is one of the most concerning parts about all of this. Yeah. The relieving chambers above the king's chambers. Now, this goes back to Atlantis and high technology.
It does. Because this all comes back to Atlantis. This stuff was built by the Atlanteans. That's kind of the point here.
Yeah, for me, because you have 4 or 5 relieving chambers. Each block, right, which is gable, is around 70 tons. And there are rows of them, and then they go up, and there's another row. That's how you displace the weight of the Great Pyramid from crushing the king's chamber below, which has a flat, by the way, granite roof on that with those giant stones. Okay, so 70 tons each, and there's a lot of them, and that's 200 feet in the air.
Yeah.
Right above the ground. So you have to get these 70-ton blocks up into build. Okay, so let's put all of that aside. Let's get back to Aswan. It's 500 100 miles away. They are quarrying. We know for a fact that it came from Aswan.
Yeah.
No wheel. They didn't have the wheel. Didn't have horses, right? They had mastodons. I think that's what it was. They had woolly mammoths, but they didn't have any of that. But they were getting these 70-ton stones out of the quarry. How do you do that? They didn't have semi-trucks. They didn't have any of that. Down, supposedly, into the Nile on a barge like that, loading it up, cruising it up the Nile, unloading it, getting it over to the Great Pyramid, and then somehow getting those blocks 200 feet in the air.
Yeah, and cutting them out of the core, they're using round diorite balls.
Right. Oh, okay.
They're not. Yeah, that's insane.
I've got one more image for you, and this is definitely, I'm going to call this 100-ton 2. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's see it.
This is the coup d'etat. This is just absolutely destroying everything. You ready?
Let's see it.
What I am about to show you is a 100-ton crane that moves 100 tons, right, on a 100-ton displacement barge. Okay?
All right.
Bam.
There it is.
That's what you need to move a 70-ton block and then get it up the Nile River.
Yep.
That right there.
Yeah, I didn't see any of those depictions on any of the walls.
Any papyrus. Yeah.
No papyrus, nothing. No.
That's what you need. It's not a joke. And people just well, man, you know, they put some water in the sand. They rolled
the wooden rollers,
palm trees. Yeah. And they pulled it with
because
hemp
they have
ropes.
so many trees around there to make all of these.
Yeah. So I'm not making light of this. This is very serious, and so that's what we would need today to do it. That's us today. And imagine the amount of labor. You have to cut the stones first off, but then to get them out of the quarry, that's what you would need to get it from the dock onto the ship and then up to. That's today. Back then, Mike, it was easy for them. It was easy.
Yeah.
They didn't have that.
Because you see it, the evidence right there. All these, huge blocks and stuff. They did it apparently pretty handily.
Yeah. They did it because it was easy. Now, could it be portals? Could it be magic? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, you had Edward Lee Scallon down there at Coral Castle saying that he had figured out how they built the pyramids, and he built his Coral Castle, which is fascinating. And all of his papers and everything's kind of disappeared. We know it had something to do with magnetics. There was a few papers that survived, and he was talking about a lot of magnetism, that sort of thing. But yeah, his secrets went with him, or the government.
It's the elephant in the room. It's the big question. It's the $1 million question. It reminds me of the movie Stargate, when James Spader is in the museum doing his lecture, right at the very beginning of the movie.
The very beginning, yeah.
And somebody raises their hand and goes, "Okay, well, but so how did they do it? Who built the Great Pyramid?" And he goes, "I don't know." And the room empties.
That's it.
Remember, he goes, "What is it? Lunch? Is it lunch?" Well, but that is so. What's your take? How do you think it was done?
Yeah. Again, I don't think it was the dynastic Egyptians.
Don't empty my room.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm going to use the A word. I believe it. Was the Atlantean culture. That civilization, and we could call them the Egyptian Atlanteans, because they would have been in that area at that time, the predecessors. And I think that they had the technology to be able to move stones at will, whether that had something to do with with magnetism or whatever it was. What some people speculate, like a sound technology, that's possible too. We've shown both with magnetics and sound that we can move things on much smaller scales today, but it's very possible. Again, we're talking about a different type of technology that they had. We as a modern society, we always try to put things into our own context. They developed their technology differently, and they obviously mastered one of these other elements or processes to be able to build these things.
How do you think the quarrying was happening? If we look at, we can look at Giza, but there was use of granite and other stuff, predating that too as well, allegedly.
Yeah,
but before modern metal tools and metallurgy, certainly before steel.
What's
copper
interesting,
and bronze.
Well, yeah, copper's not cutting granite, and that's always hilarious to me when they're stone and copper tools, perfectly even like on the statues, perfectly symmetrical. No, they had something else to do that, and not laser, because laser would vitrify the stone, so it had to be something else. But when you look there at Aswan, the obelisks that are still remaining, you're seeing these like scoop marks, these fascinating scoop marks that. It wasn't those little diorite bowls that kind of banging away at. It makes no sense. So they had some sort of technology or tool to make these scoops from around and underneath to get that block out. We haven't found that tool though.
Yeah, I don't understand it. In the at the Met, you can see this around the world, but the Met in New York has got one of the craziest displays of any museum in the world. It's the biggest display of bullshit. And this is what they have, Mike. I swore twice on this show. I feel so bad.
Uh-oh.
My mom's going to come in here and wash my mouth out with soap. I asked for it.
Lifebuoy
Here's
soap.
the thing. At the Met, which has got one of the most awesomest Egyptian wings in the world. They really do. Rivals anything.
Mm-hmm.
British Museum, the Louvre, what have you. But there, you walk through and you would normally not notice this. They have a stele, and the stele, I'm going to change cameras. The stele is about this wide and about 2.5 feet tall, red granite, okay, round top, and you stop and it's beautiful. It's about this thick. It's in a stand, and the hieroglyphs that are in it are about 1/4 of an inch tall, right? Just thousands of them.
Yeah.
Line after, excuse me, line after line after line after line. Beautiful, tiny, insane. So then you look at the hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics is in stone. Hieroglyph. Okay. Anyway,
Hieroglyphic is an adjective, so it's the hieroglyphic language, but you're writing hieroglyphs.
You're writing hieroglyphs.
Yeah.
So the engraving of the hieroglyphs, that's correct. Okay. Is probably 1/4 of an inch deep.
Mm-hmm.
So very thin lines, but it's incredible. So you're looking, wow. And it's perfect. Okay. All right. Now lock that in your mind. And it's just flawless. This stele. At the bottom of the stele is a little card. It's this big. And on the card, it says, this beautiful stele from blah, 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 BC, blah, 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 blah. The hieroglyphs were carved with this copper needle. And then you look, and underneath, right at the base of the card, is this copper needle, and it looks like a butter knife. Right? It's got a rod here, and it's got this flat blade on this side. It's about this long, and it's a frigging copper butter knife with a point on the end. And you look at that, and you're looking at this rose granite stele with this carve, and you look. No, they didn't.
No. And copper can't cut granite, so you already have a problem there.
No, and you should see these hieroglyphs, man. They're deep. They're deep, and they're perfect, and they're beautiful, but they weren't carved with that.
They were not carved by that. No.
Chicken bones, maybe.
Yeah, chicken bones.
but not. when you see stuff, let's wrap up on this.
Sure.
When we talk about high technology, and I think that the ancient Egyptians reference Atlantis themselves.
Yeah.
In Edfu, I think that is one of the clearest examples
Mm-hmm.
of that, and how Egypt was founded. I think it's right there. But when you look at drill holes, and you look at carvings into red granite, you look at these basalt and diorite and granite sarcophagus and boxes, and the Saurian, and the Serapeum is another great example of this.
Oh yeah.
Where there is definitely machining here, and it wasn't simple stone tools to get these engineering marvels of right angles and carving and perfection. What do you think ultimately did all of this? And is it older than 3000 BC?
Well, certainly older than 3000 BC. I think we've kind of established that. Yeah, they had some sort of machining that we either haven't found, or has been hidden from us because it doesn't fit the narrative right now. A lot of this stuff that we've been talking about here the last few minutes, I show these photos to my dad. He was a machinist by trade. He knows how to build these things, and he'll look at these different things and he's like, there's no way, these stone and copper tools is not going to do it. There's evidence there. There's the sarcophagus at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, where you can actually see they're cutting off the from the underside of the sarcophagus, the lid for it, and it broke off midstream. And you can actually see the round saws, the circular saws, one on top, one on the bottom, that were being driven through this thing to cut it off. Now, the dynastic Egyptians were not supposed to have circular saws. And this has one rose granite. I'm showing my dad this, and I'm like, Dad, we'll cut this. And he's looking, well, obviously circular saw. I'm like, okay, great. What kind? He's like, that's granite, right? Yeah. It's like, diamond tip saw. They were not supposed to have diamond tip saws back then. So, but apparently they did, or something equivalent to it that would cut that. And yeah, it's something that has not been found yet, or they're not sharing with us, but they definitely had some sort of advanced machining to do this.
Do you have, last question?
Mm-hmm.
I'll answer the question myself. My answer is the Assyrian, but that's my answer. When you look at all of Egypt, is there one site that seriously makes you stop and go, okay, whoa? For me, it's the Assyrian.
Yeah, there's a lot of mystery still there with the Assyrian, and even the traditional archaeologist has been working on that since the 80s. Even he said this is just like the top level of a 5-story building. There's so much more below this that's encased within, and they haven't gotten down to it yet. So that is definitely one of those mysterious locations in Egypt that, yeah, I would love to get deeper into that and unravel it. Absolutely.
Is there a site for you that stands out?
I mean, my gosh, Jimmy, there's so many.
I know.
There really are so many. I Hatshepsut's Temple. That whole setup is a favorite of mine. It's just set up so perfectly as a Stargate. We talked about it the last time.
Is there anything more dramatic?
Oh my gosh!
Than when you first, you're at the bottom of the steps and you just look, takes up your entire field of view.
It's so wide. Yeah. It's so majestic. And then when you walk back down, you're just standing at the top, and you just can look out. Across Luxor, you got the Nile River there. There's Karnak Temple, miles ahead of you. And just imagining coming out of the Stargate from there, down that grand staircase, being taken off to Karnak or wherever you're going to go. It's just
the Valley of the Kings is right there.
Yeah, right back behind.
Yep. Yeah, the Ramesseum. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
man. I just when you look at Egypt as a whole, or different sites around the world, you look at it as a whole, that's one thing, but there are moments after moment after moment after moment that there's no explanation for. The Ramesseum, okay, the highway goes right there, right next to it, and you could be there all day. And I've spent a lot of time there, a couple of times. You're the only people there. Nobody stops.
Yeah. Nobody goes there.
No, nobody goes. The buses are, and you're standing looking at the foot of Ramses that's bigger than your car. Yeah. And and you look at his butt and you just picture the size, and nobody stops. And but my point being, it's just another site. It's just crazy. You just drive past this stuff. What's behind it? The Colossus. Yeah, is around.
Oh, yeah, the Colosseum in yeah.
Again, right?
Yeah,
which the highway just goes right past it.
Yeah, which used to make a strange whistling sound. They never could figure that out. Somewhere along the way it broke, but I think the Romans broke it. But used to I forget the conditions, but yeah, it used to make this like really interesting. We call it a whistle, but it really wasn't. From the descriptions, it was some really fascinating sound that would come out of this thing.
There are ancient. Yeah. Have you seen the ancient drawings of that riverbed right there? That's got 2 additional pyramids right there. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
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 And they're gone. They're gone.
They're gone. Yeah. They're not there. Where'd they go? Well, it's like even, Hatshepsut's temple, there's, some rubble there that was the base of a pyramid. We know a pyramid was there, but it's gone. What happened to it?
Yeah. And I was going to mention, we're off the air, by the way. No, we're the tape. We're still recording, but we're off. So we'll wrap this up. But when you stand at the top of her stairs and look out, there is ancient temple after temple after temple just right in front of you.
All that, all
you're at her. Yeah, it's just right there. It's one of the funnest bus rides when you pull out of her temple, because that's a mind-blowing experience, seeing all of that. But you're tired, you're hot, you're thirsty.
Oh my gosh, it's so hot there. Yeah.
It's so hot. No shade. That's always the challenge at that temple. It's just because there's no shade. There's
no shade, and you just roast. Yeah.
Roast. But anyway, so you're back on the bus and you're pulling out and you're just looking out the window at temple after temple after temple right there. It's like, man, I want to go see that. Let's go check that out.
There's so much to see.
Yeah, so much. Mike, I can't say a whole lot, so I'm not going to, but we're going to be hanging out here very soon, so I look forward to that.
Absolutely.
And safe travels and everything else. Just always wonderful to have you on the show, and we'll do many more. Okay, so just thank you so much. Thank you for everything. Where can everybody go and keep up with you?
Yeah, you can go to my primary website, MikeRicksecker.com. You can find all my books there. You can find my event schedule. We've been talking a lot about Egypt, so join us, Stargates of Ancient Egypt tour. I'm also doing a Scottish Castle retreat with my partner Kate at the end of October, so that's going to be a lot of fun. It's over Halloween weekend, so check all that out on the event page. And then ConnectedUniversePortal.com is my online learning platform, so join me there as well.
Yeah. Hey, you know what I'm doing next year?
What's that?
I'm doing a Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh, I saw that. That looks fun. Yeah, that looks like a lot of fun.
I stole the idea from you. Mike Ricksecker, everybody. You're the absolute best, my brother. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions to this community. And until next time, I look forward to it. Be safe out there. Mike Ricksecker, everybody. Another great conversation. This wraps up this week here on Fade to Black. I've got to head out and do some stuff this weekend, but I will be back on Monday. So until then, everybody be safe. Go Backley Tapping. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.